Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl as well as the latest episode of The Walking Dead. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I could have time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Walking Dead. But first, I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. First of all, basically we had the president stepping down, resigning, because for her particular situation, it's like she feels like if she stays and like if she waits to be impeached and stuff like that, then there just turns into this whole, things will get uglier. So she feels like this is the best way to like begin the healing process. Because like the whole world turned against her because it's like, oh, she lied. Which I guess I can understand the thought process because it's like, oh, to be president, you have to have lived on this, you have to be from the United States and such and such. It's more so the fact is that she lied about and stuff like that, but it's like, because everyone's going to spin it as being like, oh, because the president's an alien, she's going to create these pro-alien agenda type of situation. So there's that, and so many people have been divided, but you have Kara, the president even saying, well, Supergirl being that beacon of hope that can like unite both sides, because there's a lot of hate going around, because it's like fear has a tendency to create monsters where none were before, because people who are afraid are just going to look at things like, oh, this is this, like I said, just reading it too much into the situation. What wasn't even there before will be looked at as like, okay, because, the president has a very different, perspective on things. She can look at it from like, oh, like coming from an alien who's lived on this planet like for quite a while. Because remember because she's lived on this planet for a long time, because her and Kat went to college together. So she's been on this planet for a long time, and it turns to that situation of like, she knows this planet as well as she would, like she's grown up on this planet hiding her identity. But I'm sure there's other side of, people being like, no. It's that complicated situation of like, I see no wrong in it, but just the fear of not knowing and just all the negative propaganda towards aliens and stuff like that, you can see where people's minds start creating problems when there are none. It's actually an element that pops up in the show that I didn't really even think about, because it's all about the fact is that aliens have abilities. Humans don't. I mean, there's a whole metahuman aspect to it. But like I said, I feel like that's not as big of a thing on Earth 38 as it is any other planet, I feel like. Because I feel like that's never been really an issue. Like all these people running around with powers, like, that's a conversation that's never really come up on The Flash, but it has on Supergirl just because of the whole alien situation. And we, like, when it comes to the show, because this is the alien show, like, there's not a lot of metahumans running around, so there's that aspect. So we have a lot of humans willing to go like, oh, no, we need to be more weaponized, we need to be stronger, be able to be on par with aliens. That way we don't have this fear, because this way we don't feel like, oh, they're stronger, superior to us. It's like, no, we're on an even ground now. But that's just going to end up creating a situation where some people might feel safer, sure, but other people might use that as an excuse to like be like, oh, aliens are trying to start stuff, we'll strike back at them even though they haven't done anything, type of thing. It's actually kind of interesting because Lena kind of shares that same thought process too. And that's something that comes up in this episode when Mercy talks to her later on. I thought was kind of interesting how like she was kind of like, because Lena doesn't choose a side, which you can see the good and bad in that. Because the fact is, it's good because it's like, hey, she's being even Stevens across the board. She doesn't see a lot of the alien hate because that's kind of her mom. But at the same time, she believes humans should have the right to become as strong or as aliens to be able to defend themselves if something happens. She wants to put them on the same level as aliens. She don't want to feel like insuperior, to them. But at the same time, the reason why I'm like, you could look at the bad in that, because it's like, it just feels like because you're toting the line between the two, it kind of makes it seem like you're taking advantage of the situation. Because even Mercy is like, oh, you're just trying to like line your pockets. That's your main goal in all of this, which is like, you don't want to look at her like that, because it's kind of like, well, at the same time, you're like, because it kind of feels like it's that Luther aspect. But then again, it's like, the Luther aspect has been very negative, anti-alien, so her being in the middle is not as, it's just interesting because I feel like you could see that negative side to her being in the middle at the same time. But at the same time, like I said, it's good because it's just kind of like, no, I'm pro-alien and pro-human. Like, so I do both. I will respect and help anyone that's on this planet, whether they be human or alien. So, like, that's what I'm just saying. It could be spun and thought of in a negative way, like any type of thing in a situation. What I also thought was kind of interesting, that Mercy was actually like a big sister to her, which I thought was so fascinating. That's so interesting to me because it's kind of like, especially kind of having the messed up family that she did, her mom being so critical, having kind of the big brother that she did. It was nice kind of having someone kind of on her side. And when she left, it didn't feel like she just left Lex. It felt like she left Lena. And ultimately, she blamed, Lena blamed Lex fully for it. And you know what's really interesting was Mercy's perspective on it, or rather, Lena talks about Mercy's perspective on it. I thought was kind of interesting because for her, Mercy felt like Lex became so short-sighted because he became so obsessed with Superman and became so hyper-focused on Superman, he wasn't looking at the big picture. She's looking at the big picture now. It's all aliens. Lex became so hyper-focused only on Superman that she kind of felt like he lost sight of, the bigger picture. Because, and that's always an interesting thing about like why Lex hates Superman so much, because he's a god amongst men, and it's just kind of like, not just Superman, Supergirl too, I'm sure you feel the exact same way, just Kryptonians in general, because it's like, you have these superpowers, you're aliens, you're this symbol of everything. It's just like, no, we're better than you, I'm better than you. Like, he has kind of a complex, it's kind of always, like, that's why I've kind of heard it stem from a lot of Lex's hate towards Superman, is that, so it's just kind of an interesting aspect, and to see like Mercy come from that to be like more widespread with her hate, it's just kind of interesting. And it's even kind of sad because like you even heard like from her too, like when she was younger, Lena wouldn't show any of her projects to Lex unless they were perfect, because anytime she would, like, Lex would always say like, oh, that's cute, maybe she can go make it pink now, because she always felt inferior to her brother, which Mercy kind of goes, well, that's just because your brother was jealous, like he was scared that you would outshine him. I also love that being over the course of that entire situation, Kara is constantly trying to get away from Lena and Eve so she could become Supergirl, but Lena's like, no, you come with me, the safest place you can be is with me, which is interesting because I know Lena's probably going to start thinking, you could think that perspective like, wow, like, I thought, like, Kara was super brave and everything, but she kind of got scared in this situation. But it's like, I can't blame her. That perspective might be there, but it's just like secretly having to do all the Supergirl stuff, like blocking the bullets and kind of knocking them back, as well as doing like a quote unquote super sneeze and knocking herself back, like, oh, I should have taken my allergy medicine. And I just loved it. Just constantly, oh, do you think we should split up? No, we need to stay together. So that was pretty neat. Well, it also seems like there is some good between Supergirl and Lena now, because Lena's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is you got in here, kind of got past all my security. She's like, but you were in crisis and you're kind of happy I'm here, aren't you? And Lena was like, yes, thank you. So it looks like things are slowly going forward. Like I said, the last time they had a conversation, which was in the season premiere, still a little awkward, but it looks like things are kind of progressing. That's the sad thing, because we see the reaction to like, oh man, everyone finding out that the president is an alien. The same, Lena's going to have the exact same reaction, especially because she considered Kara her best friend, and any issues she ever had with Supergirl is going to translate over to Kara, and it's going to be double so, because it's like, not only did we have these issues, but now I find out you're one and the same person. Oh, you've been manipulating me, you've been lying to me, because Lillian's kind of been saying the same thing, like eventually Lena's going to find out the truth about it, because she's like, she would rather Lena find out herself to kind of make the devastation hit even harder, because that in itself might shift Lena's perspective on a lot of things, sadly. Like, sadly, I feel like ultimately it's going to come down to that. It's literally going to be, like I said, because even this show kind of takes a little bit of that Smallville formula of making it so that in the past, Lex and Clark were actually really good friends. So it seems like they're going to be doing that. They could pretend, like, at any point in time, the dominoes could fall and basically we could have a repeat of that situation. I think that's, what they're potentially going to do with this whole situation. Maybe they won't, but I kind of get the feeling that they will. Especially under these certain, like, climates and circumstances of, like, humans versus aliens type of mentality that's floating around. That might kind of spark that even more. And it's interesting because it doesn't just stop on the streets. Like, it does show that it happens everywhere in workplaces like Catco. It didn't happen as badly, but it is kind of using something a coworker said in confidence to kind of prank them or joke about it. Two, we see at the DEO where people are kind of differences of opinions, like, oh, we should lock aliens up, which is interesting. Like that always, like even the Jensen thing of him working with Otis and Mercy didn't make sense to me, because it's like, you've literally worked at the DEO, which was run by an alien. Did you forget about that? Like, I mean, I remember people initially had a problem with John because they found out like, oh, we're supposed to lock up aliens and stuff like that. And it turns out you are one. So there's that. But also he's thinking like, oh, Alex is showing favoritism to aliens because she's buddy up with, Brainy, which doesn't make any sense considering she's super close and buddy with Supergirl. Because I know the regular DEO agents must not, definitely don't know that Alex and Supergirl are related. Like, there's that whole thing in itself, but it's just kind of interesting to me because, I mean, like the president said, like, fear creates those monsters where there were none before. Like, he was kind of all about, like, no, like, human and alien alike, but then he's kind of like, he believes in Alex, and just hearing that conversation, I guess it made him think, like, no, she's more invested, because it's like, oh, like, if someone treats you wrong for being an alien, bring them to me, I'll beat them up. So I guess he's saying, like, oh, that's her being super pro-human and that's her being super pro-alien and anti-human in some case, which is interesting, like, why you'd even jump to that. But I guess people harbored so much feelings. I mean, to be fair, who knows? Jensen might be a new dude, so that might be a circumstance behind that. So he probably wasn't around during the John days. Potentially, I don't know. Because another side of this whole situation is the Nia situation, which I thought was kind of interesting thing. Like, obviously, like, Brainy's image inducer malfunctioned because Mercy was trying to hack it, and that led to him being revealed as an alien in a pizza place, and Nia stood up for him. So I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Because Nia was kind of like, oh, as the editor-in-chief, Jimmy should probably make a statement, but Jimmy is kind of like, no, we need to be all about the facts. So when it came down to it, she protected Brainy. And even he was like, do I know you? And she's like, my name's Nia. No. And he was just kind of looking like, oh, dog, I get to know you. I'm like, oh, that's so cute. That's what I was wondering. Because I was wondering if they were going to make it so that they kind of hit it off a little bit. And then she finds out later on that he was an alien, that kind of come up with any issues. But it's no, because it's like Nia can understand Brainy's situation, because like she's kind of lived in that situation being a transgender woman, like having, people look at you like you're different, like there's a problem there. And that's what she felt good, because she's like, not only am I, I stood up for someone who was in a similar situation, and it felt good. And she feels like Jimmy could make people look more at the mirror at themselves, that made like the pizza people kind of like, she held up a mirror to them to kind of like, look at this hate that you're spewing. And she's thinking like Jimmy at Catco could spread that more. But Jimmy's perspective is he wants to kind of hold more balance, which you can understand why he has that perspective, because it is the situation of, yeah, people who know we're anti-alien already know we're anti-alien, but those who are on the other side, if we just are 100% pro-alien and stuff like that, they will just shut us down. They won't even listen. So we got to balance it out a little bit. But I do understand Nia's perspective too of the situation being like, because things are escalating to violence, there's no place for balance. It's only justice, because if those people are acting this way, it doesn't, like, you trying to balance an act isn't really going to help anything. Like, you got to shun and, what's the word I'm looking for? Denounce people who would go to such violence. Because even Jimmy Cons would do it in the office. It's like, we won't like stand for such, we won't stand for hate in this building or in this paper. Like, we're going to always treat people with utmost respect. But I understand the prospect and the thought process of like giving both sides, like, so that people can understand both sides of the perspective. But it's just, in this way things are escalating, it's not something that can sit right now. It's like, you kind of have to show the more pro side of things, because show that hate won't win, essentially, so I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But also what's interesting too about that whole aspect, well, two things. One, that situation knocked Brainy off his game, because there was that cute moment he had with Alex earlier when John stopped by. He's like, oh, I miss him. I do miss him. And then he's like, oh, but obviously you're doing a great job too. He's like, I see that you're a little bit stressed. The fact of the matter is, don't worry. This is just a small moment in history that has no huge impact on the planet. And she's like, that's because you're no longer in the future, and so the future can change. And it's like, oh, you're getting snarky. Must want pizza. That kind of what started all that. So I just love that little back and forth between them. But the reason why it shook him, because for one, it's like, because he kind of alludes to it himself too. It's like, it's such a small period in history, but it's still an impactful point in history because because where he's from, like everyone's just kind of out in the open, like the future he's coming from. It's like, being who he was never was an issue. He most definitely probably never had to hide who he was. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an alien. I'm from Kalu, so it was never an issue. And now he's in a time period where it does matter, like, because it's like, oh, I thought this person was my friend, and it turns out the moment they find out I'm an alien, everything changed. It's like they knew me beforehand, but just this little bit of information about me being an alien just changed your perspective on me. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting aspect in itself. But another interesting aspect was the fact is that Brain, like going back to it, is like he thought he recognized Nia, and I'm like, okay, because I didn't realize Nia was the new hero character that was coming in. I should have, because I've seen the actress that they were talking about being casted in the show. I just like I couldn't. I saw her face one time and I didn't realize. I was like, oh, okay, because there was a whole thing of like, oh yeah, they're introducing a transgender hero in the show. It's not a character from the comic books. I think I remember hearing it's just a character's like created specifically for the Supergirl TV show, which is pretty cool. And I think that's what it was, because Brainiac's probably familiar with a lot of the superheroes of the modern age, so he probably recognized me. Because like, why do I recognize you? Like, do I know you or something? So that's probably what it is. So they're probably setting that up. I'm curious to see what her situation ends up being. Is it going to be like technology that gives her powers, or does she end up becoming like a metahuman or something? So like I said, I'd be kind of interested to see what that ends up going about, which will be very interesting considering the fact is it's like she's kind of the new Kara, and then Kara kind of has like a new person to kind of train and teach under her to kind of become a hero, which would be pretty interesting. Like I said, I'm so curious to see what they ultimately end up doing with that. So, but the real crazy thing about it, obviously, we had the Agent Liberty. We can just drop the off. But for now, we're calling him that. Because there was a part of me that was wondering, like, oh, you don't think he's the vice president, do you? It's like, oh, no, the vice president is making a statement. And then we had the Agent of Liberty kind of talking to all these different people. And it's like, kind of riling people up. It's like, oh yeah, they're doing this. Like, the fact of the matter is Supergirl is telling us to be hopeful, but it's like she's an alien herself. The fact of the matter is, like, we're kind of outmatched in strength and stuff like that because these aliens, blah, 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 blah. Just telling them to feed into their fear. It will give them the strength they need. So just fear mongering, So that was kind of interesting. And John's there because John doesn't really have to worry about the whole thing to kind of hide him as an alien, because for him, he just naturally has that ability. Being a Martian, he has that mimicking ability naturally, so no technology downs will mess with that. So I'm interested to see what happens, especially with what happened, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but then like you had Mercy get that little bit of kryptonite, and it's like, okay, what's that all about? And we see it in, they're using the same device that was, I guess it should be noted, because Otis himself brought it up early in the episode, mocking Alex, being like, oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is the DEO, I've heard what you guys did, putting lead in the air so the Daxamites have no choice but to leave. And it's like, well, they're doing the same thing, except now with kryptonite. And we see Kara kind of falling out of the air. Like, it's probably not enough to, well, because kryptonite for long periods of time, I think can kill Kara potentially. At the very least, is going to knock her out of commission. At most, it's going to make it so she doesn't have her powers, but it's spreading it in the atmosphere. So the question then becomes, like, is that something that they can? Well, it's probably because it's such a small amount too. It's probably just getting dispersed in the air around National City, but that's kind of the whole point, because it's like they don't want to kill Supergirl and make her a martyr. They just need to take her out of commission long enough for things to spiral without her kind of interfering. So I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us in the next episode. How do you get around this situation? And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead, a great episode. A lot of things went down in this episode, so let's break everything down bit by bit. First of all, it seems like they're kind of hinting at, like, Michonne and Rick potentially having a baby, because he's like, oh, that's not the only way to build a future. And even Michonne's kind of like, yeah? And he's like, yeah, which is interesting, because I think in the comic books, I think he does have another kid with Audrey. I could be wrong, because with all, obviously the TV show is doing its own thing, because for one, Carl obviously is alive in the comic books, not in the show. Judith's not alive in the comic books. When Lori died, Judith died in the comic books. So I don't know. I could be wrong about that. I could be me misremembering that, but I could have sworn that they have a kid together, Rick and Audrey. So that might be them kind of heading in that direction with Michonne and Rick, which is interesting just on many different levels, just with what the big thing is about this season. Obviously, I don't want to talk about it just because it's like I said, if you've seen trailers or seen any news of the show, you know what the thing is. I just don't want to talk about it until it happens. So it's just kind of interesting that that's kind of coming up now, especially just because of the whole Maggie and Glenn situation, just kind of like, oh, that's just interesting. The whole Herschel situation kind of makes that go, oh, puts that situation in a different perspective. I'm talking in circles, like I said. I want to wait until it happens in the show before I really like break it down and discuss it. This episode almost kind of has like a murder mystery aspect to it, to a certain degree. It's kind of interesting, you know, Rick being the cop and everything. Well, to be fair, this isn't the first time that's happened. Let's not forget, like season 4, there was a whole. We later on found out it was Carol, but those people that were being burned at that time was by Carol. So there's that. It was the woman that Tyrese was in love with. She ended up being one of the victims. Who, interesting enough, is the actress who played Mama McCall from Teen Wolf, the TV show. But nevertheless, that's me going in a tangent, because it turns out Justin was killed, which I kind of figured as much. It's also interesting because he was kind of like, oh, it's you. So it's almost like, oh, so he knew it, so it might have been someone from the sanctuary. But I'll kind of get to that soon enough. But in retrospect, basically, Justin's murder sets everything off because it's like, oh, who did it? It's like, oh, Anne must have done it because she has plenty of reason because she hates Simon. It didn't make as much sense until, well, I'll go ahead and break it down. Like, it didn't make as much sense to me the moment they said that until now I'm like, oh, all the people that died, it didn't even correlate in my head because I didn't really pay enough attention to that, were people that were part of Simon's group. So I was like, that, of course, he'd had the biggest motive. And it's like, oh, what about Daryl? I guess Daryl killed off a lot of people in Simon's crew or something like that. Because it's like, oh, started what he finished. But I thought that was kind of an interesting little detail. Like, now knowing what you know at the end of the episode, well, go ahead and talk about it. Like, the twist is that it was Ocean's. Like, I was like, who is, it's like, it has to be some random party because, like, Daryl knew, like, the moment he saw the weapon, he knew it was. It's like, oh, it's B. Because I was thinking it kind of suspicious that B was just knocked out like that. She's like, oh, I don't, it's like, really? They knock you out to kidnap someone? I don't see that, but now it kind of makes sense. Because this is all about taking out, because it's like, oh, they want to take out all of Simon's people because Simon's people are kind of what set a lot of stuff for Oceanside. Like, because Oceanside, because Cindy, because I kept calling her Cassie, it's Cindy, had told Maggie, like, oh, this is a place we first found. Like, it was found by Cindy's mom and her grandma, and it was when there was a lot more people for Oceanside. And I'm guessing this is the place when they first, you know, killed all the men and boys. At least the way the conversation is, because it's like, I was always under the impression that they were always at Oceanside. That's where all this stuff happened. It's like, no, it happened here. And then eventually they ran away to Oceanside because that was the only way they had to run and escape. So that's what that was. But they're seeking revenge. It's sad because, like, all this time, Rick is trying to keep everything together while everything's falling apart. Like I said, like, some, not all, but some of the people who are part from the sanctuary are like fed up because they're like, oh, we're being picked off. We don't have protection. But there's that one dude, was named Mud or Judd, was a complete another asshole because he went in, got some of the fruit, and started eating it. But Maggie was like, oh, what's your name? I'm gonna report you. And he's like, oh, you're the widow. It's like, you had the audacity to call her by that name, especially because that whole name came about because of Negan, because he killed her husband. So it's just like, the fact of the matter is you being a dick and calling her that, it's just spitting in her face. And it's because it's just like, you're kind of going along those same lines as Negan and being like, oh, throwing in her face, like, oh, you're the widow because your husband's dead. You know, it's just like, it's just a shitty thing to do. But one of the people from the sanctuary is like, oh, no. Yeah, write his name down. Thank you for the food. Like, she's one of those people trying to work towards this situation. He's not one. You understand, like, he's one of those people that isn't down for it anyway. He's just taking it. He's just like, it is what it is. I'm working with this situation. But more so than anything, it's like, hey, these people, some people of ours are going missing. And he kind of thought amongst anyone, Maggie probably had the biggest reason to do it, but along with everything else too. Everyone else too. So it turns into a situation. There's even the dude who's from the sanctuary who's at the hilltop who's like, no, I'm on your side. And he's like, no, you're not, because you spend so much time at hilltop. You're pretty much hilltop at this point in time. So it's kind of like, you're not on our side. You're not have our best interest at heart. Rick had to show up to kind of calm everything down. It's so sad because, like, he was having such a wonderful day with Michonne and Judith, that is just, it's a kind of this fun family moment because he wanted to kind of take time away from all of that, even pulling Michonne away from her charter and stuff like that, because he's like, he's like, oh, I didn't even need to go to the bridge today, because it's like, oh, they've got that handle. It's like, look at all that you've accomplished. You're looking after things in Alexandria while I'm dealing with the bridge, but everything that you've done, and being just who you are, thank you, It just kind of put a damper on that situation and a different group. It's so interesting because it's just like, it's such a complicated situation because even Rick had to go ask Daryl whether he did it or not. And he was like, do you think I did? He's like, no, I don't think you did, but other people might. And so I'm going to ask if you did it anyway, because the weapon kind of looked like it could be potentially from an arrow or whatever. Because for Daryl, it's like he understands where Rick is coming from with this whole situation, but he's like, this happening was bound to happen when you bring all these people together. But Rick is like, no, it's not, because he's like, he knows it's going to take some time, and it's not the easiest thing for a lot of people to forget the past, but it's like, hey, maybe we can move forward, and, I want people to see what I see moving forward, because he even brings up the example of like, he just wants Daryl to try, because it's like, hey, it's easy to not forget and, want to do something because, think about the guy, in particular, I thought was kind of really nice how he phrased it, where he's basically like, look at where we are. You hated my guts because remember, I'm the dude that left your brother on that roof to die. And look where we are now. We are the best of buds. We've come this far together. We're allies. And so it's just kind of like, I want you to kind of, give that same situation with this, Because at the end of the day, and it was interesting that conversation he had with Carol, where Carol was like, the fact of the matter is, it's not my choice. It's not your choice. It has to be them. The sanctuary has to want it. And a lot of them don't. Like, they're kind of like, we surrender, so we kind of have no choice. You guys won. And if we try to fight back, because we also have no guns, it'd be a losing situation. So that's why that's why they're kind of going along with it. So, but for Rick, it's just the fact of the matter is, after everything that they've lost to get to where they are, he wants to do good. He wants to honor those that they've lost, not just by the sanctuary's hand, but all across. I'm sure like when he was saying that, even kind of, I subtly interpret it as kind of like referencing Carol's daughter, for example, and just all that they've lost. The fact is that, he kind of almost says like a Negan thing. Negan is kind of all about like, oh, people are a valuable resource. But for Rick, he puts in more this perspective of every life's important. This world is already overrun with the dead. Why spend that time fighting and killing each other? Every life is important, about rebuilding humanity and, making sure that we survive. And the only way we survive and ensure a stronger future is by working together. Because even Maggie, even Daryl asked her, is like, are you doing all this because you believe in Rick's plan, or are you just trying to make him happy? And in all honesty, she doesn't know, and neither does he. But for her, she does want to at least give it a try, because she knows what Rick is building is for the future, a good future that Herschel will be built for Herschel. But, neither her nor, Daryl can really move past everything that's happened, So then you had some of the people in the sanctuary kind of messing things up by threatening Carol. But even when the time came, Rick he was trying to talk to him. Was like, don't do this. We can find another way. And so they ended up not killing him. And even Carol responded like, every life is important. We see them kind of walking away at the end. I don't know whether that's a situation where they've kind of modified it. So it's like, yeah, you kind of screwed it up for the entire group, so get back to work, or is he just keeping his eyes on certain ones while everyone gets back to work? I'm curious to it's never expressly explained what that situation was when we see Rick and everyone kind of looking at them walking. So either, because it might be them just kind of walking away in a sense of like, they're done doing this whole labor thing, unless they kind of get like what they wanted in the end, they won't. So I don't know. I mean, to be fair, you're still alive, and Rick and Carol didn't kill you, so that should be seen as a bonus, but still, So I'm curious to see what that situation ends up being. Because like I said, just tensions keep rising. But what was really interesting about what set Cindy and the others off, because initially they were kind of like, hey, Rick told us to come fight for y'all, and we did. But then we kind of flew in with this situation because we felt like, okay, we didn't really have much choice in the matter. But then Maggie killed Gregory, and she didn't really suffer any ramifications for it. So it's like, no. It's not just Rick's rules. Like, there are other rules at play here. And Maggie kind of felt bad because she's like, I set this all in motion. These are people getting killed. Yes, they're saviors and stuff like that, but these are still people getting killed. But Maggie kind of changes her mind. Her and Daryl walk away when that lady's pleading, because it's like, but for Cindy, it's like, you didn't do it. Like, you're claiming that Simon forced you, but it's like that smile on your face. You told my brother, my 11-year-old brother, before you killed him, that like no exceptions should be made. And so they walk away. But she's like, I changed, because she was literally one of the people that was fighting, telling, the other saviors to stop, trying to keep calm, trying to keep peace. Because I think she legitimately had changed, but it's that sad thing of like not moving past the past, which is what Rick was hoping for. And now, because even Cindy was kind of like, oh, once we do this, it'll be done, because they've had at that point, we'll have wiped out everyone from Simon's crew, the ones that personally wronged them. But Maggie talked about it kind of being like, once other people will find out that you did this, but at the same time, it's that thing of like, it's an endless cycle, because eventually the people from the sanctuary will find out. They'll want blood and retaliation. It's just one thing after another. That's why like Rick didn't want to go down that route, because it's like, because even the question came up of like, even Jerry asked a great question of like, well, say we find this person, what do we do? Is it going to be a Gregory situation, or is it going to be a Negan situation? And then you see Rick and Maggie kind of look at each other for a little bit, just kind of look away, because they don't know. And then lo and behold, who said it? Cindy was like, oh, they'll get what they deserve, which in the long run, they're behind everything. So they got the revenge they deserve. And I'm curious to see what ends up happening on that front for them. Like, when it does eventually come out, I guess chalking it up that Daryl and Maggie won't really say anything. Probably won't say anything at all. But eventually it probably will be found out that it was them. Because if it doesn't come out, it's going to be like, they're still going to be searching for the people behind it. So we'll see what that ends up turning into. Like I said, it's just a sad set of circumstances. It's just like, you understand where they're coming from, but it's just kind of like, when Rick is trying so hard, everything is kind of coming unraveled. Like, that people aren't able to see what he sees. But even Maggie's kind of like, yeah, we gave Rick's thing a shot. Now it's time for us to, but to be fair, it's that situation of like, you played your own part in it too. Like, you made them see, you kind of opened that pathway by you doing what you did by killing Gregory like that, which is like, I don't, like I said, it leaves you so conflicted, because you're like, Gregory kind of had to go. He was causing too much trouble, but it's like, that's the thing. You don't know about what your actions will do. Like, and who knows what the long-term effects are going to, like what the domino effects are going to be for this. So that's the crazy thing about it. Another crazy aspect to this episode is the whole Gabriel and Jada situation. Well, and because we learn a little bit more about her situation, because she goes back to because I love it when Gabriel was asking her stuff like, did you see anything? She's like, what? Do you think I'm keeping something? It's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is you won't give him a straight answer. Every time something comes up, you keep kind of changing the subject a little bit like that. Like, you making him doubt himself. But then she ends up picking up a secret radio, and she contacts the people connected with the choppers. It turns out, at that point, it's like, oh, they have nothing to do with this. So, but the fact is, she thought that they did, because they haven't had any pickups. So I wonder, are there other people with the same, like, conditions that Anne had, that it's like, okay, give you A's or B's, which I'll get to that in a second. Is it just Anne, or do they just do they have it set up with just her, or do they have it set up with other people, or do they just randomly grab other people? I kind of get the inkling like it's probably like, no, there's some people they have that dealing with. But essentially what it turns out to be, it's like she gives over A or B people, and she will get supplies. That's what that was the initial deal for her people. I guess, ever since her people died, she hasn't really taken advantage of that situation. Or maybe she stopped after a while. Once her people got to a good enough place, she stopped doing that. Potentially, I don't know. Because Gabriel did say, like, oh, you were trying to do that to me and Rick, weren't you? So there's that. But Gabriel confronts her, and she's saying, like, no, we can run away. The fact of the matter is, I did some terrible things, but it's like, hey, like, when it was all said and done, and the sanctuary people were coming at me, you were the only one that stood by me because everyone else kind of like moved away from me. And even Rick doubts me. It's like, well, the fact of the matter is, can you blame Rick considering the fact is you've screwed him over a couple times, so it's okay for him to be suspicious, but he's still willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. Because when Gabriel was like, oh yeah, like she did this, he's like, all right, I 100% trust you. Because even him having Gabriel look after you was also because it's like, no, like people might still come after you because they might blame you, think you're behind all this. So there's that. But Gabriel wouldn't just go with her. She's saying like, oh, we'll go to this great place. All you have to do is do a little something for me, and we could go to a place that'd be greater than you can imagine. Later on, because he wouldn't do it, because because he worked so hard to gain, Rick's trust and be the person that he is, that he's like, no, I can't betray his trust now after everything that's kind of been built up. And she goes, I never thought, I always thought you were a B, and knocks him out. So, two things. Was Anne just playing him the entire time, or did she really fall for him? Or was he just a means to an end? Because the thing is, like, she was going to ask him to do, was she going to ask him to be the self-sacrifice, or was she going to ask him, it's like, okay, so that we're good, we're going to need someone else to turn over. They want an A. Now, how I'm chalking that up is, well, I literally just thought about it because I was like, oh, an A must be someone who's leading and stuff like that, and B must be a follower. And then it clicked in my head just now. A as in alpha and B as in beta type of situation. So there's probably two different groups. That's how to categorize people. Alphas and betas. Alphas being strong-willed leader types. So I'm wondering, is that supposed to be like, what do they need these people for? Is it because they're taking these people kind of to bolster their own ranks, or these people experiments or something? Because even she was shocked because she was like, oh, like you are an alpha type. Like the way Gabriel handled that situation, she just thought he was a beta. So that's why I'm kind of like, okay. So, but then my question also was like, the fact of the matter is she looked at him like that means that somewhere in the back of her mind, she recognized like, hey, I can turn him in. Maybe that's supposed to be her thought process from before. Maybe she doesn't look at people that same way, between who's an A and who's a B anymore, but still. So there's that. I can only assume she's turning Gabriel into as her A, and then the question is going to be like, oh, where's Gabriel? And I'm sure she's going to be sticking around because obviously she hasn't told anyone about that circumstance. I mean, why haven't you? I mean, I guess that's something you don't want to get mixed up into, because it's interesting. Like some of the trailers and stuff like that, I'll admit, I'll go ahead and talk about it, is like they talk about like some of the stuff I saw was like, oh, some of people's favorite main antagonists are coming out this season. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with that group that Anne is connected to. Because even the fact that she goes back to the name Jadis, I guess because when she made that deal all that time ago, she was using the name Jadis instead of her real name Anne, so like I said, this was a lot to digest, a lot of interesting development. So I'm curious on so many fronts where this is all going to go, what the whole Anne situation turns out to be about, also this whole Gabriel thing. In retrospect, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, do you think that's why Anne was acting the way that she was when she came to that place, because she recognized it? Were all those walkers in there actually people that she knew from her original group? Because I don't know if the saviors would have bothered like putting bullets in her head or not, like making sure they were dead. Like they probably didn't care enough to. I don't know. That's why I'm wondering, because it seemed like she was a little caught off guard during that whole situation. And now in retrospect, that's like, oh yeah, that kind of makes more sense. Now also, that Maggie and Daryl are going to go after Negan. And I'm completely missing over that big point of like what Rick was talking about to Carol, because for him, it's like every day he wakes up, there's a small part of his brain that thinks like, I should just go downstairs, kill Negan and just end all of this. Probably even suggesting, in his thought process, going after all of the saviors too. But he stops himself because of what I talked about earlier, like all the hopes of all the people they've lost along the way. He has to honor them by not going down that route, wanting to change things. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a hard fought row with all of this, especially consider. This is also interestingly enough, like I'm cutting myself off here, but it's like that was our first time seeing Alexandria subsequently this season, just a little bit. I mean, last time we saw it was the whole mid-season finale. I think it was the last time we saw Alexandria, to my knowledge. Maybe we subsequently saw it. I don't remember. But nevertheless, well, it was like the mid-season premiere, because that kind of picked up there. Nevertheless, Point is, I'm so curious to see, where everything goes. Rick's trying so hard to keep all this stable, but it's all slowly falling apart piece by piece. Will he be able to kind of bring everything back together? We'll just have to wait and see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.